The Atlanta Falcons are switching to Michael Penix, who the New York Giants were heavily involved in scouting this offseason. Will that decision to pass on Penix come back to bite them?
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of Locked On Falcons. Myself, Aaron Freeman, joined for a crossover Thursday with the illustrious Patricia, Traina of Locked On Giants. And of course, crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Make sure you download the app and use code Locked On NFL, and you can win $50 instantly when you play $5. And both Patricia and I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of both of our podcasts. And to become an everydayer, all you have to do is, make these shows your first listen each and every day. And all you have to do is subscribe to YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. So since it is a crossover Thursday between the Atlanta Falcons and New York Giants in this epic Week 16 showdown, a lot of quarterback question marks heading into this week. Or, the Falcons playing musical chairs at the quarterback position. Will the Giants play musical chairs at the quarterback position? We'll get into all of that, as well as the biggest stories beyond the quarterback position, some key matchups, and certainly keys to victory as this show goes on. Usually, Patricia, I tend to be, a very gracious guest and give the road team, in this case, the New York Giants, sort of first run in this. But we know kind of the big story this week involving this matchup is going to involve the Atlanta Falcons and the switch from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix. It's been something that has been a long time coming, with a really tough 5-game stretch for Kirk Cousins, 1 touchdown, 9 interceptions across that stretch. And with the Falcons needing to kind of run the table to finish the season, with 3 wins, hoping to get to 10 wins and have a shot to win the NFC South, have a shot to maybe unseat the Washington Commanders, who they face next week on Sunday Night Football, at a shot at that 7 seed. They feel like Michael Penix is going to provide that spark. And all week long on Locked On Falcons, I've been trying to temper expectations for Michael Penix, given that he's a rookie quarterback. But there's certainly a lot of hype, and certainly he does seem to have kind of a favorable matchup this week against New York. And I think that was a big reason why the Falcons made that switch, with him, being at home, and being able to attack this Giants defense. But what is your eyes when you see this Penix matchup? And are you worried with the rookie, or do you feel like this may invigorate this Giants defense?
Well, first off, Aaron, I felt for you because I was thinking about you the other day. I know you were so high on Kirk Sember and Kirk Tober and all that stuff. So, but yeah, it's time to change. And I think, with the changing of the guard, perfect time for the Falcons to make the switch. The Giants are banged up. The Giants are right now lost as a team. They're just, surviving as best as they can out there. Their competition is not so much for a playoff spot, but for the number 1 overall draft pick with the Las Vegas Raiders, amongst other teams. So I think what also adds another layer to this whole storyline is that Penix was a guy the Giants scouted. Head coach Brian Daboll, general manager Joe Schoen, they were at Penix's pro day. They liked him a lot. I know they didn't like him enough to take him at 6 overall. And quite honestly, I think everybody was kind of surprised that the Falcons jumped in and drafted him when they did, especially after signing Kirk Cousins to that multi-million-dollar contract that they did. So I think with Penix, you have a guy who is a little bit more mobile, a guy obviously with fresh legs, just somebody who they've been developing, I'm sure, behind the scenes. I don't know if you guys get to see the practices in their entirety, but Penix is a very, very good player. And here's the other thing. He's a lefty. So now that adds another layer, I think, of intrigue, because, a lot of defenses might be set up for a right-handed quarterback. Now you got a left-handed quarterback in there. So now how's that going to play off in terms of, how you scheme things up if you're defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. So I'm excited to see Penix in action. I know he's only thrown like 5 passes so far this year, but I think he's going to be a good challenge for a depleted Giants defense. I don't know if they'll be able to stop him. And he's got weapons to lean on, Bijan Robinson, Drake London. So I'm very interested to see how the offense changes now with Penix running it.
As are we all. And I think it'll be interesting with this matchup. You mentioned sort of the weapons that Penix has, but because he's been, basically not getting any first team reps really all season, and certainly wasn't during the summer with Kirk Cousins taking all those reps, he hasn't really worked with this group of wide receivers. And so that's going to be a big test in this game, because my suspicion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Giants play a decent amount of man coverage. And I would imagine that they'll probably try to dial up that man coverage and maybe force Michael Penix to, try to fit some of these tight window throws, test his accuracy. That was an issue at times during his college career. And, can he, without that sort of rapport that you have, months and months of with the practice reps over these last several months, is he going to be able to hit those throws in some of those tight windows? And teams have had some success manning up the Atlanta Falcons these last couple of weeks. So that has been a contributing factor to some of their offensive struggles. So I think that's going to be an interesting test. And I think because this Giants team did do a lot of work on Michael Penix, how they sort of game plan against him, I think is going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, the Giants actually play more zone coverage, but your point about forcing Penix into making some of these tight window throws, I do think we'll see a little bit more man coverage this weekend. If Deonte Banks plays, and he hasn't played, I think, in the last 3 games because he's had a rib injury, but if he's able to play, man coverage just so happens to be his strength. So this would be a really good time for Deonte Banks to get back on the field, have him, trail Drake London wherever he goes, and see if you can't take that element out of the game. The pass rush, which has been it's tailed off somewhat. Now last week they were able to get a couple of sacks, but Brian Burns is ailing. They don't have Dexter Lawrence. He's on IR. So if they could somehow, push the pocket, make Penix uncomfortable, maybe they can force some errors, some errant throws. Maybe they can, get some turnovers. Turnovers have been so hard to come by for this Giants team. So, there are things they can do. The question is do they have the manpower to do it?
Yeah. And I think it's music to the ears of Falcon fans when you say that Brian Burns is a little nicked up, because he has been known to dominate the Atlanta Falcons over the last couple of years. I believe 4.5 sacks. I think I did the math, like 29 pressures in his last 8 games against the Atlanta Falcons, obviously having a lot of success in Carolina. So we'll see what he can do. But speaking of the pass rush, that's kind of the big story for the Falcons defense, is they've had a reinvigorated pass rush since their bye week. They have 13 sacks in the last 3 games. It's tied for the second most in the NFL. And they're facing a Giants team that in their last 3 games has given up 11 sacks, which is tied for the second most allowed in the NFL. So I'm curious with this Giants offensive line. I know that was a huge issue last year. It feels like they've made strides this season, but is it still good enough, especially considering some of the concerns they have at the quarterback position?
Well, Aaron, the Giants just played, I believe, their 7th different offensive line combination last week. They're probably going to have an 8th this week because, right, to recap, Andrew Thomas is on IR. John Runyon Jr., the left guard, is on IR. His replacement, Aaron Stinney, is in the concussion protocol. So we could be looking at Jake Kubas, who was an undrafted rookie free agent, playing left guard. John Michael Schmitz, the center, he's been, he's had his moments, but hasn't been as solid as you'd like him to be. On the right side, Evan Neal is at right tackle. He's played well, all things considered. And then you've got Greg Van Roten, who has really been the best of the 5, which is not saying much because he's been okay, but not great. And then I forgot to mention, of course, Jermaine Illuminor, who's playing on the left side. So this Giants offensive line has been banged up, which is just, disappointing because they don't have enough young talent in the pipeline that's ready to step in. So yeah, this is a concern for me. For Drew Lock is gonna, he's trending towards starting. Brian Dable said he's going to be the starter after he missed last week with the heel and the left elbow injury. But yeah, the Giants, the offense, they've got a tall task. And what good is having a Malik Nabers, who is also banged up, by the way? I mean, who isn't banged up on the Giants at this point, right?
Yeah.
Chirone Tracy is on the injury report. Theo Johnson, their young tight end, he's on IR. Daniel Bellinger, you've got him. Darius Slade. I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle for this Giants team against this Falcons defense.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how big an uphill battle, and that will be a perfect way to get into sort of some of those topics that you're discussing with this New York Giants team, talking about those injuries as well. But for the Falcons playing again musical chairs at the quarterback position, Patricia, as you said, Drew Lock's trending towards starting, but I have the feeling that you may think Drew Lock starting this Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons may not be the thing that helps the Giants win this game. And we'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's Crossover Thursday. So it's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first big matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. And then the Clemson Tigers are looking to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. And time is a precious commodity. And sometimes I certainly feel like I find myself disappointed in myself because I feel like I spend way too much time wasting that time scrolling mindlessly on my phone. And I often think, man, this time could be put to something a little bit more useful, something to use my time more wisely, ways to improve myself. And thankfully, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, has an offer to help me improve with more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses on a variety of topics: history, politics, economics, philosophy, chemistry, mathematics, and so much more. All their courses are self-paced, and you can start whenever you want, however you want. So you can go deeper with the readings, the quizzes, the discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. So continuing today's Crossover Thursday, myself, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. And Patricia, let's get into the Giants situation. Obviously, the Falcons are making a quarterback change. The Giants have been back and forth with the quarterback situation all season long. That's a big storyline. I'm sure that is something that you will be spending a lot of time talking about, the future of the New York Giants quarterback position over the next, 4+ months leading up to the NFL draft. But this week, over the next, let's say, 4 days, I guess, if my math is right, on how long till Sunday, it does sound like Drew Lock, who's been battling injuries, is trending towards starting. But I feel like you may think that maybe the Giants should, turn the tables to Tim Boyle, who is a very familiar player for Falcon fans because he started 2 games over the last 3 years against the Atlanta Falcons. And he showed some things last week against the Baltimore Ravens. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the Giants quarterback situation?
Well, it's a mess like the rest of the team. I mean, for the first time since 1992, the Giants have had 4 different quarterbacks take snaps in the regular season. 4. So you'd have to go back to the days of Phil Simms, Jeff Hostetler, Dave Brown, who, I know a lot of Giant fans would like to forget. I believe Kent Graham was the other one. So this year it's been Daniel Jones, it's been Drew Lock, it's been Tim Boyle, and of course Tommy DeVito. So, but yeah, to your point, Aaron, look, Drew Lock. It was interesting when the Giants decided to bench Daniel Jones. Everybody thought, okay, Drew Lock is next up, because he was QB2. Well, they went to Tommy DeVito, which was kind of a head scratcher. And, just going back and looking back over the previous months, it was like, okay, Drew Lock, he wasn't very good in the limited time he got. And then, of course, he got injured and that set him back. But then Tommy DeVito goes out there and he's not very good, still holding on to the ball too long. So they go to Drew Lock. Drew Lock has had moments. He is a little bit quicker with his processing and his decision-making. Doesn't always make the right decision. If you go back to his last start, which was, I believe, against the Saints, I want to say. Yeah, the Saints. He made some decisions and you're sitting there going, what's going on here? What are you thinking, man? So Tim Boyle comes in last week. It's for the second half after Tommy DeVito gets concussed. And guess what? Now all of a sudden you've got a quarterback who is throwing with anticipation, who's, making the right reads, who's putting the ball where the receivers can get it. And he was actually moving the offense. And, I know you look at the numbers and you say, well, he only completed 50% of his passes. He also had 3 defensive pass interferences, which, you figure if those balls get completed, his numbers look a little bit better. And he had that beautiful touchdown pass to Malik Nabers. Nabers' first touchdown pass since week 3. So it just looked like, considering that Boyle hadn't worked in practice with the Giants receivers, that, he only got here about a month or so ago, he looked pretty up on the offense. And like I said, he was throwing with anticipation, something that we haven't seen since the days of Eli Manning.
Okay. Yeah. The Giants quarterback situation is interesting. Obviously, the Falcons are dealing with some issues right now. And I think you kind of mentioned it with that connection with Malik Nabers. We know that Malik Nabers is the Giants' most dynamic playmaker. And if Tim Boyle seems to have that sort of connection, I think that does help out this Giants offense. So it'll be interesting to see, if they do roll with Drew Lock, as you say, they're trending in that direction. I'll be curious how the Falcons defend Malik Nabers. My expectation is that they haven't asked AJ Terrell to shadow a bunch this season. They have dabbled with it, but I do think they'll probably ask him to shadow Malik Nabers in this game and hope that their top corner can keep him locked down. And then we'll just sort of see if, the Wan'Dale Robinsons and the Darius Slaytons can take advantage of the potential matchups that they'll get against the Falcons' lesser corners like the Alford and Mike Hughes, who, if you watched the Falcons-Vikings game a couple of weeks ago, those guys really struggled with the Vikings wide receivers. And so that will be sort of an interesting thing. But I know with Malik Nabers dealing with injuries, I know that's been kind of the story of the week for the Giants, where they have so many players beat up heading into this matchup, right?
Yeah, they do. I mean, their cornerbacks, Drew Phillips, their slot cornerback, is banged up. I don't know if they're going to have Deonte Banks. I don't know if they're going to have Cordell Flott. I mean, they're hopeful they will have these guys back. But again, at this point, Aaron, it's probably better to talk about who will play as opposed to who might not play, because that's how bad the Giants injury report is. 21 guys on the report.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess for the Falcon fans that certainly aren't familiar with it, who's the player that you sort of circle that you feel like if this player misses the game, it may have the most dramatic impact on the outcome?
Brian Burns, for sure. I mean, Brian Burns, that guy is a warrior. I mean, you mentioned you have seen him, from the Falcons Carolina games in the past. Brian Burns has been dealing with a painful groin since I think week 3. Now he had somebody roll up on his ankle, and it's funny. I've gotten to know Brian, really sweetheart of a guy, and I always call him by his nickname, Spider-Man. Like, that's his nickname. And I go, Spider-Man, how you doing? And he just looks at me, goes, superheroes don't have time to sit back and give into injuries, So he wants to be out there. He wants to play. I think he feels a sense of, look, I've got this big contract. Everybody is counting on me. I'm not going to let guys down. He's been pretty good for the Giants, all things considered. Now, you look at his numbers and you say, well, he could be a lot better. Yes, but he's been a bright spot, I think, on that defense.
Yeah, I think so. And calling Brian Burns a sweetheart, to you, not necessarily the Falcons offensive lineman and Falcons quarterback, I think, over the years. So, I guess he turns it on the field and whatnot. But is there anything else that Falcon fans and certainly Giants fans will be looking out in this matchup heading into Week 16 with this Giants team?
Yeah, I think what we probably want to keep an eye on is the Giants running game. Chirone Tracy is banged up, but I do expect he's going to play. Now, here's what's interesting about Chirone Tracy. He's a former, you might know this already, former receiver in college. But this year, when it's come to catching passes out of the backfield, he's been terrible. Absolutely terrible. So, does he become one-dimensional this week? I don't know. But the kid's been pretty good. I mean, we're not talking Saquon Barkley good. But then again, he doesn't have that Philly offensive line in front of him run blocking. But there's a lot to like about him. So, I think if Drew Lock is banged up going into this game, and who's healthy at this point in the season, right? I think you'll probably see them lean a little bit more on that running game if they can. Devin Singletary's kind of been kind of a forgotten guy, but they'll probably get him involved. They did a little bit more last week. So, it's just a mess right now for the Giants because you've got so many guys banged up. You've got so many questions. I don't even recognize this roster anymore. I mean, I always took pride in, knowing the numbers and the names and the faces. And now I go into the locker room and I'm like, okay, who's this? Who's that? What number is this guy?
Yeah. I think you bring up a great point with Chirone Tracy. I know he's had been kind of cooled off after a pretty solid middle section of the season, being very productive. I think some of that is owed to, the Giants kind of be forced to abandon the run because they've fallen behind in some of their recent matchups. But I think this is a favorable matchup for him in this Giants run scheme if they do want to commit to the run. The offenses that have given the Falcons run defense the biggest problems are teams that love to run 3 wide receiver sets. And I know the Giants, I think, are like 7th in terms of using those sets most in the NFL. And if you just sort of run a downhill run sort of scheme, and I know that's traditionally what Brian Daboll has done in New York and elsewhere in Buffalo. And so I feel like this is a favorable matchup for Chirone Tracy if the Giants can stay committed to running the football. And, the key I think for that is if the Falcons get off to a fast start and we'll see if they can do that with a rookie quarterback. But I think that's going to be a big part of, sort of this chess match where if this does kind of get into a grinded out 2 teams just trying to smash each other with their run games, I do think the Giants going up against the Falcons run defense that hasn't been great this season. When you look at sort of the talent that the Falcons have at the running back position with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, you say, oh, well, the Giants don't have that sort of talent. But I do feel like it does kind of favor them given some of the struggles the Falcons have had this year stopping the run.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Giants at this point, I know the fans want them to tank. They want them to lose out because they want that number 1 overall pick. We're in a race right now with the Raiders, as I said earlier. But look, I don't think anybody in that locker room is thinking about tanking. Certainly not Brian Daboll because his job is on the line. And if they get embarrassed by the Falcons, no disrespect. The Falcons are a very good team. So I'm not trying to suggest that they shouldn't, be competitive or anything like that. But if the Giants go down there and the Falcons blow their doors off, and look, Falcons have scored, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, they have scored in 7 of their last 8 quarters. Okay. They're a dangerous team. Even though, last week they just barely eked it out against the Raiders. They are a team that can make some waves. So if the Giants get embarrassed, gosh, I don't want to even look at my social media mentions after the game because it's going to be ugly. I mean, it's been ugly for us here in the land of the Giants every week. And, you just want to see a competitive game. And at this point, can the Giants give you a competitive game? And I don't know that they can, given all the injuries.
Yeah, we'll see. But we'll talk about sort of what each team needs to do. And you talk about the Falcons scoring. I think a lot of those scores are field goals. And I think one of the keys
doesn't matter. It's more than what the Giants have done.
Sure, you're right. You're right. I forget who I'm talking to. But yeah, I think one of the keys for the Falcons, especially with Penix and hoping that they're, he sort of rejuvenates that offense, is going to be, being able to convert rather than settling for those field goals and scoring touchdowns. And that will lead us into sort of what do these teams need to do to win the game, and otherwise known as the keys to victory. And we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Crossover Thursday. Continuing tackling the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app is going to give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, feeling like Chirone Tracy is going to get that score, or, Bijan Robinson is going to break a big one out of the backfield, go to the same place where you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, all on the same page where you place your bets over at FanDuel.com. And when you go there, check out the line for this Falcons-Giants action, which has moved quite a bit since the Falcons named Michael Penix their starter. Originally, it opened up with the Falcons being favored by 9.5. Last I checked, they were favored by 7.5. Maybe that changes in the coming days. So go check it out at FanDuel. And when you do, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants here for Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Patricia, let's wrap up today's Crossover Thursday talking about keys to victory. 3 for the Giants, 3 for the Falcons. I'll give you the floor as I am such a gracious host to talk about the Giants' keys to victory.
Well, the good news for the Giants is I don't think they have to worry about any planes flying overhead because the Falcons play in the dome. So that's good news for the Giants. Not that they admit that that's a distraction, but keys to the game. Obviously, you have a rookie quarterback in Michael Penix, and, as good as he might be, rookies can be rattled. So you want to get after him. You want to maybe confuse him, I don't know, again, what the Falcons have done to prepare him with the show team and whatnot. But if you can do some disguising of your defenses and get him off his game a little bit, make him think he's seeing one thing and maybe he's seeing the other, and maybe you can force some mistakes. So that would be certainly key number 1. Key number 2, obviously, stop the run. I don't know how they're going to do it. They've got a makeshift defensive line. The outside linebackers, like I said, Brian Burns is banged up. Kayvon Thibodeau has been, hit and miss against the run, but you got to slow down Bijan Robinson, especially up the middle. Now last week, the Giants kind of did a decent enough job on Derrick Henry, but there were some chunk plays that they gave up. Lamar Jackson got some chunk plays. So you've got to keep those under wraps. And Penix is a guy who can run the ball as well. So you want to make sure that that you're covering that as well. And then I think the other key is just simply for the Giants, stop shooting yourself in the foot. They have had penalties, drop passes, bad throws. The Giants are just not good enough to overcome the mistakes they have made. In every game, there is a catalog of mistakes that I've come up with that if this had been different or that had been different. Now, I'm not expecting perfection, but there's no reason to have like illegal shifts or illegal formations. What are you guys doing in practice if you're not, working on all this stuff? You should get all that out of your system, and it's still going on this late in the season. And look, if the Giants are going to keep making mistakes, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, and they're not going to give themselves a good chance to win.
Yeah, the Falcons have been dealing with some of those issues as well during their 4-game losing streak. Some of the lack of discipline. We'll see which of these two teams is the more disciplined. That'll probably help them out. But when I look at the Falcons and sort of their 3 keys, it does start with sort of the offensive line in the trenches. And, without Dexter Lawrence, the Falcons have been a little soft up the middle on their offensive line. So I think that helps. But they got to make sure Brian Burns does not take over the game like he has done so many times in their past matchups against Carolina. We'll see what Kayvon Thibodeau does. This is their first time really seeing him. So he also may have some advantageous situations. Obviously, the issue with having that left-handed quarterback is now your blind side is flipped, and Caleb McGarry is not the world's best pass protector. He's really good at running the football or run blocking when it comes to running the football. So I think the Falcons will do their best to sort of chip on that side, but that takes, potentially a tight end out of the offense, so like Kyle Pitts. So we'll see how they handle that. I think on the flip side, the second key, I think, is the Falcons need to get pressure. They've done a good job these last 3 weeks. If Drew Lock plays this game, Drew Lock tends to be very volatile. He will put the ball in harm's way. So I think if they can get pressure on Drew Lock, they will be able to create the turnovers that they need to give their young rookie quarterback more opportunities to put points on the board. And that's the third key. You got to put those points on the board, especially when you get to the red zone. The Falcons have basically, I think, been the second worst red zone team during this 5-game slump that they've been on. And so that is one of the areas that you hope to see Michael Penix improve upon. But we know that historically speaking, rookies don't typically operate well in the red zone, at least immediately in the NFL. So that will be a big test for Michael Penix in his Falcons offense. But if Penix can give them just a little shot in the arm, a little adrenaline in the arm when it comes to the red zone, that I think will go a long way to helping this Falcon team walk away with a victory.
Yeah, and you guys also have a new kicker, from what I understand, in addition to that, all that, although that's probably the least of your concerns. But, look, a lot on the line. The Falcons in second place, I believe, right now in the NFC South. So
Yes.
you can still make a run. You're not out of the playoffs. The Giants out of the playoffs, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's just not the Giants' year this year. The 100th anniversary of the New York Giants has just been a year to forget.
Yeah. So we'll see if the Giants can change the narrative with I don't want to say surprise win, but certainly not a win that many people expect them to win. So we'll see how competitive these two teams are. Of course, we will have you covered all week long here on Locked On Falcons as well as Locked On Giants. And make sure you continue to make us your first listen each and every day by subscribing on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, if you want to get the lowdown in the other NFL action this weekend with the other 30 NFL teams, make sure you check out Locked On NFL. All right. 2 shows daily. Tyler Rowland, Tony Wiggins, the madman in the morning, the real barbershop talk in the afternoon. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.